Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our presentation of the e-commerce suite by North49. We are an integrated product to the Sage 300 accounting system as well as to Sage Intacct, but today we're going to focus on Sage 300. I should point out, as we begin, I did turn on the recording, as you probably noticed, so this will be available after the fact for you to share with colleagues or to refresh your memory. Just reach out to me and let me know if you'd like to get a copy of that. The customer portal is a standalone product, but it is also an integral part of the Webtelligence product, which is the integrated full e-commerce platform for Sage 300. So, but because of the way we communicate, the portal being a live read of data, we were able to separate that and provide that as a separate standalone product. You'll notice down here the logo Sage Tech Partner Plus. That's the new word that, or the new label, I guess, Sage has given us. So it used to be ISVs, used to be development partners, now we're tech partners. The plus simply indicates that we are what's referred to as an endorsed product on the customer portal side of things, which means Sage sells that directly through their reseller channel. So just like you would buy your Sage 300 licenses, you would buy that directly from Sage. And so they would contract with you with that subscription, same as you would with your Sage 300 stuff. So let me just go through a few introductory slides here to get the concepts rolling. If you have any questions, I will attempt to monitor the Q&A, and please use the Q&A as opposed to the chat because the Q&A does get recorded with the recording, and we can follow up later if we don't get a chance to answer all the questions that may come up. So things changed fairly dramatically over the past few years, as I'm sure comes to no surprise to anybody. And I guess things that folks adopted, businesses as well as consumers adopted practices that are going to become commonplace, and folks are going to want to continue to do things the way that they did out of necessity through the pandemic, but discovered that it was so convenient they wanted to continue to do things that way. So getting online was fairly crucial, and it really just accelerated through the pandemic and continues on today. And being online now is really an integral part of being in business. It's an expectation from your customers. And even prior to the pandemic, this was the trend. And you can see some of these numbers that are floated out here that folks, and probably no surprise again to anybody, people do a lot of their research online. The sales process now for anybody who's selling anything has changed over the past several years. By the time a customer makes it to you, they are 80% of the way through their buying cycle. And they're only reaching out to you to get to that last 20% of the way. So you need to have that online presence and probably even finish that last 20%, which is to provide that online method for them to make that purchase or to interact with you in some way, shape, or form. And some fairly startling statistics that were published, I think this was last year, it points to the increase in online purchases in certain sectors. But the startling bit is that very last line there that, almost half of the people surveyed said that they would change suppliers if they didn't get the online ordering capabilities that they wanted. And that's, fairly alarming to people if you don't happen to be one of those organizations that has that online presence. So, the time is now. You can't really wait on this anymore. You need to get in this game if you're not already. And I think it's less and less people are in this game. What might be different, however, is, folks rushed in perhaps and created this online web store, if that's the route they went. But without the thought to, well, how does this integrate into my back office? That was kind of an afterthought because it's usually the marketing folks that are driving that side of it. And then later on, they bring in the folks on the accounting side in the back office, say, okay, now I got all these orders. Now you got to get them into the accounting system to fulfill. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you had that thought process in advance and took care of that all in the same process, right? So that's one of these things where we say, do your homework. Make sure that you're aware of what's out there in your world to work with your ERP. And in the Sage 300 world, there's folks like us who build it purpose-built to be integrated into Sage 300, and that's what we do. So lots of web development platforms out there, and there's ways that you can connect them, I say in air quotes, to your ERP, but they do not do it the same. It's not to the same depth. It's not to the same effectiveness as having it purpose-built in a platform like our Webtelligence platform. So we've been doing this for many, many years. We've been Sage 300 development partners, so almost since Sage, or back in the day when it was called ACPAC, even the DOS days for ACPAC Plus. The principals of the company were developing products way back then from the late 80s up until today. We've sold pretty much every product that we built over the years. Sage owns pretty much all of them now outside of our e-commerce products. And they have been integrated into the core of the Sage 300 product. And in that process, Sage actually contracted with North49 to do that work, to integrate them in. So we have been digging around in the Sage 300 source code. So when it comes to creating a product that is tightly integrated into Sage 300, there's probably nobody better out there from an ISV or a third-party standpoint that knows more about that than North49. Our team has got deep knowledge of Sage 300, and we can build an integrated product probably better than most. And we are on their, I guess, a development partner council. Can't remember what it's called exactly, but we do get advance warning of all the new releases as they come out. So our products are compatible with the Sage 300 release before it hits the street. So you can be confident that when you invest in a North49 product, it will remain compatible as you upgrade through the various different revisions of the Sage 300 product. There's really three sort of primary areas that we focus on, and I wouldn't call these necessarily all products, although they are different iterations of the same product. The customer portal, of course, which I'll start with, and I'll show you how that works. It can be a standalone product. It does have a sales person or an employee type login component to it. Doesn't go as far as a full-on web store, what we can do with the North49, with the Webtelligence product, of course, because in the Webtelligence product, we do have data on board in that platform that allows us to do a lot more things. The customer portal does not have any of its own data. It relies on a live read and feed of data from Sage 300. So it does need to have a live connection into Sage 300. And to do so, we do consume a Sage user license. And the same holds true with Webtelligence. We do need that user license to, on one side, replicate data to the platform. And we also do deploy that live read of data as well to send orders in, to read information out of Sage to present to a customer when they're online, usually in the customer portal kind of scenario. And remember, a customer portal is always part of a Webtelligence implementation. So we don't replicate all that customer data, all their past invoices and all that stuff onto the web store. We read it live out of Sage. So it's always up to date as well as Sage is up to date. So because we're reading it live, it's in there, we can display it for the customer and we can show it to them. So enough of that part of things. Let me start off with the customer portal and show you what that's all about. So the first thing that I'd like to start out with is something we call our click to pay. And this is really the most basic implementation of a customer portal. And what click to pay does is allows you to embed a link either directly into your invoice document. So that would be in the crystal form that is published inside of Sage. And when you send that out to a customer, it would have this link in it. And the link just contains this type of information. So directs them to the URL, which would be your customer portal. And that's going to be a subdomain of your own domain. So your customers are comfortable that they're going to your domain. And we're also going to pass to it the customer number, which is their AR account number, as well as the document number. And so that is going to direct them straight into the into the customer portal page that gives them the ability to pay that invoice. Now, we have not asked them to log in here. So the only thing they can do here is pay you money. They can't go and check their account or do anything else. So you saw that slight delay as we waited there. That was the customer portal or the click to pay querying Sage and bringing back the information. So what we're doing here is we're verifying that this invoice is for this customer and it is still open to pay. And we filled in the custom comfort and their invoice date and actually did fill in the invoice amount there as well. So now from this perspective, all the customer has to do is click that pay invoice. It's going to invoke the payment processor. In our case, we are a division of Evo Payments, that's EVO Payments. And we would set you up with a merchant account, with a PayFabric merchant account. That's the name of the product, which we have integrated into the customer portal. It would then, so when the customer clicks that pay invoice button, it would then invoke the the pay fabric window here to allow the customer to enter their card details and make that payment. So let me just go through that process. That's all of them. Put an expiry date, and I think my test card can be almost anything. And a CVV, and I think I do need a card holder name. It's Joe Blow, and I hit that pay button. So when I hit that pay button, what we're doing now is we're sending that transaction off to the payment gateway, and it's going to send us back what's referred to as a post back. So we've got our on-screen receipt saying the transaction was successful. At this time, what's happening in the background is we are appending this into an AR receipt batch in Sage 300 that is open for credit card processing. If there's not one open, we will open it. And so that finishes that transaction. So from your standpoint, from a merchant standpoint, there was nothing you had to do to affect that transaction. The customer did it all. They called up their invoice, they paid that invoice, and we appended that directly into that Sage 300 AR receipt batch. So all you have to do is post that batch and you're done. So if you consider how much time it takes you or your staff to process a payment in this fashion, if you did not have a system like this. So typically you would have to go out to the virtual terminal of the payment processor, enter the card details, enter the transaction details, hit the pay button, get that post back, and then you would have to manually write that into the AR receipt inside of Sage against that invoice and such, and make that happen. So that could be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, I guess. You probably know better than I, but I think that's a fairly conservative estimate. And if you consider how many times you have to do that, and once you see how much this particular product costs, you'll find that it pays for itself very quickly. Also, what's happening in the background here is we are sending out notifications. So first of all, we're going to send an email notification to the email address on the AR account for this customer, telling them of this transaction, essentially showing them this information here in an email. Also, internally to your staff, we have 3 ways that we can inform you of this. Number 1, it can be to an email address, and that can be a distribution list, and everybody on that list who needs to know that this payment was made. It can be to a Microsoft Teams team. And again, everybody on that team would get notified that this happened. This customer paid this invoice for this amount of money, and that's instantaneous. And the same is true for a Slack message. We can set up a Slack channel, and we can notify everybody on that Slack channel that this has happened. And again, with all that information, if you want to show that. So all this stuff happens in the background. Everybody gets notified that this has happened. So if you're in a collection proceeding with this particular customer, you want to know when they paid. And this is going to tell you exactly when that got paid. Now, clearly here they can print this. Again, they've got that receipt that was sent to them by email as well. So they've got lots of ways to make sure that they know that this has been paid. And from a referral standpoint, when a customer goes back and looks at their customer portal to find out if this was paid, we look at paid invoices, we look at everything that's sitting in the batch, not yet posted, so the customer will always see that that payment was successful. So that was the click to pay. Fairly straightforward. And again, we didn't ask them to log in, so all they can do is make that payment. This is what the full-on customer portal looks like. I just point out a few things here for you. Number 1, currently, we're multilingual, French and English, and if somebody wants to change the language, all the labels that we have control over, we will change. This is merchant control. So, of course, whatever they type it in as, that's what it's going to show up here. And they control that in the admin backend for the portal. Let me change back to French. So we would attempt to drop a cookie on the customer site if they accept cookies, so that next time they log in, it's going to show up in French. And of course, in the back end, you have the option to turn on which language you want to be the default. It's very easy for us to add a new language. If you need Spanish or some other language, let us know. It's a resource file that we can have translated to do that. We may require some assistance to do that if we don't have that language in-house. So the things that you control, the merchant controls, are this. This is going to be your logo, and this is a fair bit of real estate up here. So it can be your logo with some messaging like we've done here. It's just an image file. You point to that image file, that's where it's going to show up next once you save it. This is your information here, which you also enter, and this is your welcome message to the customer, of course, which you enter as well. So you control that completely. To get customers registered, it's a fairly simple process. So number 1, you can do it completely if you want to, which means that the customer has to get in touch with you, say, please give me access to the portal, and you would set them up as a user in the back end. The easier way to do it and less work for you is to let the customer self-register. So they would provide themselves with a username. They would need to know their AR account number, some other sort of corroborating bit of information about their AR account. And we do have about 5 different questions that you can ask them about that AR account that they would have to know, and only they would know if they had access to the account. And of course, they set up their password and all that good stuff as well. And once they do that, there's 2 ways that they can get authorized for access. Number one, they can wait for you to grant them access, which means it's a little bit of work for you on the back end, but it's easy to do. Or if they answer this question correctly, you can grant them immediate access. And that's an option that you have in the back end to turn this on and off. And if you do that, you also have the option to send an email again to that AR email address that sits on that AR account and let them know that this user has requested access to their account. And if for some reason they didn't want that to be the case, you can turn them off very easily. And you can have more than one user on any one AR account. So multiple people from that company can do business on this customer's behalf. So that's how it all comes together with folks getting registered on the portal. And again, up to you how you want to control that. The least work method is let them self-register and give them immediate access if they answer the question correctly. That means basically no work for you unless they come back to you and say, no, I don't want that person to have access. Incidentally, you can also pay an invoice directly from here too without having to log in. They just have to enter the customer number and the invoice number. And like we did with the click to pay, we're going to run out, make sure into Sage, make sure that those are valid for that customer and still open to pay, and then we allow them to pay it. A couple of things to point out on this screen as well. You'll notice all these radio buttons up here. We can take payments on invoices, on orders, on quotes, or on unallocated cash payment that just sits on that customer account. And then you would just apply that to whatever you want to apply that for. So those are the different methods of payment that we can, or the payments, I guess, we can take against certain documents inside of Sage 300. Let's go back to here and let's log in and I can show you what the customer portal looks like from a customer perspective. So the first thing that might happen, and this again is optional, it's up to you, is you can have a message go out to this particular customer when he logs in. And so this is from you to that customer. And this is controlled here inside of Sage 300. And this is the Sage 300 version we have sort of backing up this portal. And let me log into Dan Penn's account here and look at comments. So you'll notice here we've designated a comment type called web. And this is that comment here, right? That's the one that is showing up on the screen for him. So you can create a comment in here, save it, and then when the customer logs in, he's going to see that comment. So this is a way for you to communicate one-on-one with that customer. And when I click OK here, what happens, I'll talk about that in a second. What happens is, let me just close this, and I'll navigate away and back to this. Whoops, sorry. Let me just open that up again. Get back to 1600. What's happened now, and this kind of demonstrates our live read and feed of data, you notice that comment type has changed to web acknowledge. So that means the customer clicked the OK button, we know he's seen it. So that kind of demonstrates how we're feeding data back and forth live into Sage 300. And I don't want to beat that to death, just understand that that's what we're doing in the way of orders, in the way of reading data, in the way of posting payments, all that. It's a live feed and read of data. So this kind of just demonstrates that for you. So that's a way that you can communicate one-on-one with a customer. The second one here, this is what we call a broadcast message, and it goes to every customer that logs into the portal. And you control this in the portal backend, which I'll hopefully give you a look at in a bit if we have time, because I need to also speak about the Webtelligence side of things. So this goes to everybody. This might be a policy change. This might be our holiday hours, could be whatever, but you want everyone to see this when they log in. And again, when they click OK, we flag it for that user. Don't show it again to keep annoying them. It's all done. So there are 3 different subscription levels in the customer portal. There's the basic portal, which would include the account activity, view transactions, view orders, and contact us. The optional add-on is to do online payments, which would include the pay account, prepayment, and the managed credit cards. And then the third add-on component is the order entry, which is a quick order entry form that customers can use to place orders with you that end up live into Sage 300. So that's the 3 different subscription levels. And these are all published on our website. So you can see what they cost. Both US and Canadian pricing is there. They're pretty inexpensive. I think you'll agree. I mean, if you've got everything, you're under, I think it's under 4,000 US per year for the subscription. There's no user licensing. We just consume that one Sage user license and that's it. So very inexpensive. So let's just give you a quick look at what's inside of all of these various icons. So the first one is really just summary information about that customer account, last few payments that were made, last few invoices, how much do I owe, that kind of stuff. From here, once you get into one of these screens, you can navigate through the menu, or you can go back to the icon view and have a look at that. So this screen here shows all of the different transactions that you can display for a customer from Sage. And again, we're reading this stuff live. So we went, when I clicked that button, we went and fetched all this stuff and brought it back to the screen here. And these are all the different document types that exist inside of AR. Now, if there's some of these you don't want to display for the customer, you can easily turn them off. Again, in the back end on the admin side, it's just a checkbox. If you check it off, they don't show up here and they don't show up on this screen. So here's all the different types, kind of color coded. If they're highlighted in blue, it means you can drill down on them and get an on-screen rendering of that document. The order it came from, the invoice number it came from. Here's the order. If they want to reprint that, they certainly can. That's up to them. What we do is provide, this is essentially our version of what that crystal form might look like. We do denote it as a web copy. So if a customer is confused, if it's not exactly like the one that you put out of Sage, at least they understand that I got it from the portal. It may not be an exact replication of the invoice that came out of Sage. And of course, they can save it as a PDF. They can print it to whatever printer that they've got. They can do whatever they want to do with that. So this helps to deal with those customers who are habitually saying, oh, I didn't get the invoice. Can you resend it to me? Well, once you train them, it's here always. You can always get it here. This is your live account. They shouldn't have to make that call anymore. So these are all the different document types, and this will give them every bit of history that they've had. If you had data in Sage for the last 15 years, they can see the last 15 years worth of transactions in here. And if they're only interested in seeing documents that still have a balance on them, they just select that to open only, and they just see the ones that have a balance on them. What most people get the portal for, most merchants that is so that customers can pay them online. And this means that you've got a merchant account set up, of course, and we would set you up with that PayFabric merchant account through Evo Payments, who's our parent. But this allows them to do that online. So when I click that pay button, now it highlights that line as being the one I want to pay. Notice that this now opened up, and we do have the option of allowing you to let customers part pay invoices. Now, we don't always think it's a great idea. It's up to you. It's an option. There are, obviously valid business cases why someone might want to do that. But again, part of the reason why people get the portal is to offload some of that administrative reconciliation burden. So if you allow partial payments, kind of created that for yourself to deal with. Again, it's an option, up to you. We would recommend just turning that off, but it's there as an option for you. So when the customer clicks that make payment, this is what brings up the next screen here. So we have the ability to store a credit card token. That's the encrypted credit card, which we are allowed to have to stay on the right side of PCI compliance. Neither the portal nor you, by extension, ever really touch that credit card. When I did that click to pay payment, you saw that screen pop up that allowed me to enter those card details. That was in the credit card processing vault. We did not have access to that information. We popped up that secondary window, which temporarily farmed that transaction out to the processor. So they're the only ones who have that. They're fully PCI compliant. They go through all this rigorous testing every year to maintain that compliance and security. And it's a very serious thing for them because that's their business. So that's what they do. We farm the transaction, so they handle it. We don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about it. So none of us has any PCI compliance exposure. So if the customer chose to store that card, the next thing they can do is hit make payment. What they're going to see on the screen now is that receipt like we saw when we did that click to pay. The emails go out, the notifications go out internally by a Slack, Teams, or email. So everybody gets notified that this payment got made. We do have the ability to do ACH payments as well. So that's a US thing, not necessarily in Canada, although there are some inroads being made there that should be available shortly. but this allows them to go straight from their bank account. And so when this happens, it pops up a different screen, which allows them to enter their, their transit details, their account number, all those types of things in here. And when they hit that pay button, then we send that transaction again off to the gateway, and it sends it off to the bank. And so that's another option that's available to merchants to pay by ACH as opposed to paying by credit card. And that's a function of the merchant account that gets set up through the payment processor. We spoke a little bit about the prepayment options, and here's those again in the screen on here. So this is the unallocated cash payment that folks can make. They just give some reference. Bob told me to pay, so I'm paying. Here's how much. Make that payment, go straight to their account. Here's the orders that they can pay on. So outstanding orders, you want to make a payment on that order. Hit that make payment button. If we're going to apply to that order, it's going to sit on that order. So when it actually gets invoiced and shipped, it's been paid for, at least partially paid for. And that will sit right on that record. Same for quotes. Now, if you're familiar with Sage 300, we can't really attach a payment to a quote, but we do so in a notation field so that when you're going ahead and process this into an order, you can see it's there and maybe transfer that onto that prepayment field in the order itself. So those are the different ways that you can accept prepayments from a customer. The managed credit cards part is really just showing them which cards they have on file that they can reuse. If they want to delete that, we just mark it as inactive and it won't show up there again for them to use. On the view order side of things, there's a few things going on in here. So we can deal with quotes, we can deal with orders. In fact, we can deal with all the different order types. We support them all within Sage 300. Interesting about quotes is that when we go to this order entry side of things, customers can submit a quote as opposed to an order, or internally your staff could create a quote for a customer and they can have a look at it on here. So we got a couple of quotes here. This one's expired. Here's one that's approved, means that either the customer submitted it and then you approved it, or somebody internally created it for the customer to view. And the customer comes on here to have a look at it. If they like what they see on here, yeah, that looks good to me. They click that and they can turn that into an active order by hitting that confirm button. That's going to go straight into Sage 300 as an active order. Most likely you have the option to put it in on hold. But since this has already gone through that whole approval process, you probably want it ready to fulfill. You hit confirm, it's an active order ready to fulfill inside of Sage 300. So that's kind of, that's kind of cool. So all the different order types, again, you can drill down on them like we showed with the invoice display. All that same kind of stuff happens. They can reprint it. They can do all that stuff. Another interesting thing on here is you can either look at this screen by the order or by the item. So this is kind of like a back order list of stuff I'm still waiting for you to ship to me. And here's the orders that those items are sitting on. And again, you can drill down into those orders. So that's just kind of another view of that same situation. And again, that open only, and of course, how many do I want to see on the page? All the usual stuff you'd expect is there. The order entry side of things is kind of cool. Now, this is clearly aimed at a business-to-business customer, somebody who already have an accounts receivable. We have to have an account to process against. And because I've logged in, we already have that context. We know who this person is. We know their different ship-to locations. We can let them enter a new one if they would like to. They can give us a PO number. They can fill in all this detail here. And this, I think you can turn on and off the ship by because that's normally an internal thing. And we have designed all these screens to work effectively regardless of the device you're working on. So even if you're working on a cell phone, you notice the menu is now switched down to this fold-out menu. The add items down here now is always on display. So regardless of the device that the customer is using, all the screens will modify to suit that device. And we don't just shrink them down. We actually change the content of those screens to be appropriate for that device. And for that purpose, we allow this to be folded away so that when we squash that down again, you've got a lot more real estate on here, but always that add item field is always on display. That's never really hidden. You don't have to scroll to get to it. So again, we don't have any data here. You recall I said that in the beginning. As far as the customer portal is concerned, Webtelligence, that's a different story. But as far as the customer portal is concerned, we have no data. So what we have to do here, I'm going to turn that off just for a second. We have to type in at least 3 characters of what we're looking for, and either hit the enter key or hit that finder there. And what happens is now we run out to Sage Inventory Control and we bring back everything that satisfied that request. So here we go. I got that one item. Because I checked that box off, what it basically does, it just adds that line item. I can enter my quantity. Incidentally, if there is what we call a salesperson login, it could be any staff member, but you can turn this on to be editable. So if you give your staff the ability to negotiate with a customer, this can be an editable field. I wouldn't recommend turning that on for a customer, but it's there as an option for you. The next level of detail is here. So let's say, so that first one where I turned that checkbox off, I could just sit down and entirely keyboard driven, just enter an order. I'm somewhat familiar with either the product SKU or the description, or so the fields we search when somebody types in at least 3 characters there are the item number, the description, those 4 additional item information lines that live in inventory control, and I believe we can even search the customer item number. So if you're maintaining that customer item number against your own item number, the customer can search by their own item number and it will return your item. So in this case now, let's say I'm not terribly familiar, I just needed some reinforcement that I'm ordering the right thing. Let's see which one has what I need on it. Let's try that one. So what happens, oh, did I get it? Oh, here we go. Sorry, just a little delay. My internet's a bit sluggish. So here's those 4 additional item information lines here. We're displaying all that. We're displaying an image if you want to store images. There could be more than one image here. And we can store these anywhere. We can be on the portal itself. It can be somewhere that you maintain yourself, as long as we can access it. We know what the naming convention is, which is typically the item number. We'll serve that up. And again, so this just reinforces, yes, that's the item I wanted. I can add that to my cart. So you see down here, we've got, you can place an order or you can place a quote. You can turn these on and off. So it's up to you which one or which ones, one or both, that you want to have customers have access to. So if they place that quote, that's going to end up as a quote in the system. If they place that order, that's going to end up directly as an order in the system. And so it's going to, again, fire that off live into Sage 300 and come back with that order number. So that's the next order number in line. And that's the order in Sage 300 that is there. Now they're probably on hold in this case. That's an option because we want someone to get eyes on that before we actually fulfill it, just to make sure that there were no mistakes in the process of bringing that up. And apologies for the delay here. Working from home, and both my wife and I are, and sometimes that takes a toll on our internet speeds. So here's that order that was just placed into Sage. I don't know if you heard that sort of chime in the background. That was me getting the email notification that an order was placed. So if you recall, I said when somebody makes a payment, we get a notification. The same holds true when orders happen, or can be. It's up to you. The same holds true when a new user registers, or if somebody made a payment and it didn't complete. All that stuff you can be notified of. So this is the customer portal part. So this, this is not meant to be, this order entry side of things is not meant to be a web store. It's really just a quick and easy way for customers to get a quick order in. A repeat order, generally speaking, is what it's all about. Clearly not aimed at being a full e-commerce platform. That's what our Webtelligence platform is all about. So, and we can chat about that here as well. It's getting a little bit of lag here, but bear with me while this comes back up. So if there's any questions on that, please pop them into the Q&A. Just wait for this to wake up again, and I will show you some stuff about Webtelligence. Now, I don't want to pop into the back end of the portal just yet. I want to have some time to talk about our Webtelligence product first. So let's do that. What different customers have deployed on their sites just to sort of feature the different capabilities, the functions and the features of the product. So here's one such person. Now, these guys are strictly wholesale. They only sell to their resellers, but they wanted to be sort of the go-to resource when people wanted information about the products that they sell. So they have one Sage 300 instance, but they have 2 web stores because they wanted a distinctly different look and feel for their US customers than they did for their Canadian customers. And so you'll see that they're slightly different. This is the US version. And then the Canadian version is this guy here. So you can see they're slightly different. The content is essentially the same, but the style sheets are a little bit different. So this is a fairly plain site because, they're typically dealing with trades folks, guys out in the field. They wanted to keep it kind of simple because a lot of times they're doing this work from their cell phones, and they just wanted to be cognizant of data plans and not consuming too much. So they kept it fairly plain. They did. I'm not going to log in here just to show you the difference between when I'm logged in, so what's behind the gate and what's in front of the gate. So they kept a really flat category structure here. And, our recommendation was, let's not be so flat, but this is what they wanted. So, of course, customer gets what they want. We would probably, structure this a little bit more tiered, a little bit more tree structure to it, just to make it a little easier for folks to find things, but it seems to work for them. So as I navigate into one of these categories, you can see all the things. This is what we would call a category view. So these are all the various products within this category. And they took an interesting approach to deal with the French language side of things. I believe they're owned by a French parent. So rather than creating a separate, entirely different French site, they used an optional field inside that item record to display the French description, which was fairly clever. And it keeps maintenance down to a minimum as well, and keeps their costs down because they're not maintaining, two different language sites for the same products. And so when I click into this, it displays a fairly significant amount of information about that product, but no ability to buy, as you can see here. So there's a big blank space there because we're not showing them any of that. And again, they only sell through their reseller channel, but they want customers to be able to get information here. So they got a couple of images associated with this. They've got a ton of product information. So you remember I said earlier that we do replicate some data from Sage. So automatically, all of the item information gets replicated into Sage here. So whatever's in inventory control, we get that automatically. You don't have to rekey that. You should never have to enter any piece of data more than once into this system. Sage is the ultimate system of record, but there's some stuff that you want on a web store that Sage has no ability to store. And that's this kind of stuff here. So we have a component called data port. And data port serves a few functions. It deals with that mass sort of movement or replication of data back and forth between the two systems. And it also allows you to add additional information. So it's a bit of a content management tool as well. So all of this information that sits in here is entered through data port. And it's referred to as a glob, which just means you can put anything you want in there. You can put HTML text, a code in there. You can just put plain text in there. The style sheet for the page would typically deal with the formatting. So most folks don't put HTML in here, but some folks have that skill set in house and they want to control that down to that level. That's up to them. Most of our customers, they will just put text in and let the page format it for them. So a ton of information you can associate here. Images also get associated through data port. The related products, that is an optional component that you can add into your web store. Which that's something that you control as the merchant. In this case, they chose to do all the spare parts for that piece of equipment. It could be anything. It could be, if you're buying this, you might also want to buy that or whatever. You can recommend products. It's called the recommended products thing. They did it as spare parts. They've added a bunch of information in here. So this is kind of cool. They got this parts list, which is an exploded diagram of the parts, which just shows them what all the parts are and where they are. And we could have, give this a second to load. We could have put, hyperlinks on these things to take them right to that part on the page. They chose not to do it. I guess it was just more work. Obviously, more work means more money, so they chose not to. But that's kind of cool. They got a user manual in here as well, so you can associate PDF documents, any other kind of document or videos or anything else that you wanted to do on here. And that's what they did in this case. They put a video in here on the function of that piece of equipment as well. And the customers also bought. So this is the other thing you see a lot on web stores is when you bought this, other customers who bought this also bought these things. So the system actually controls and generates this. So we will actually go back and look at the last several invoices, whatever we determine or whatever you determine you want to look back on, say the last half a dozen customers who bought this item, what else did they buy on that same order or that same invoice? And we'll go ahead and display that here. And you usually want to have a finite number here. You don't want to have an overwhelming list of stuff. So you might want to choose the top I don't know, 3 or 6 or something to display here. And it kind of depends upon what you designed this page to look like. You want it to be clean and easy to navigate, and that's really the key here. And incidentally, on that point, we don't just present you with a few templates and say, pick the one that you think is, most suited to what you want to do, and we'll make minor modifications to it. We actually will design this to your exact specifications. Now, it's not to say we can't start from a template. If you have something that you like, we certainly can do that, but we're not limited to that. So whatever you want that buying experience to be for your customers, respecting your brand identity and your colors and logos and all that stuff, we will put that on that page and make sure that it is an extension of your brand identity for your customers. So again, it's consider it a blank canvas, and we can make it sing and dance and do anything you need it to do to your exact specifications. So that's everything that was available to somebody, before they log in. As a customer, just a general guy out there, I don't have an account with these guys. That's what I can see. When I log into the site, I get a completely different view. So here's my login credentials. Once I log in, I get presented with something different. Now here's me. I'm an AR customer for these guys. I'm one of the resellers. This is the first thing I see in my landing page. So the customer portal we saw before, that's the package product that we sell through Sage. This one is designed specifically to this merchant's specifications, and these are the items they wanted to see on it. So they wanted to have their flyers on here. This could have been a bit more colorful, but again, that's their choice. They wanted to do it this way. That's what they get. You got the account activity, the view transactions, what's my order status. Purchase history is kind of interesting because you can reorder from prior orders or invoices sometimes. So a lot of cases, folks in the B2B world, they're just doing a replenishment order. Just replenish my inventory. So rather than going through the whole category, find this, find that, add it to the cart, they can just go back and say, yes, that was the order I wanted. I either want it all again with the click of one checkbox, or just check off the items they wanted to reorder, send them straight to the cart. They're in, they're out very quickly. And that's what this reorder is all about, right? They go back and they look at the prior invoices and then just select those items that they wanted to reorder. Just give this a second to load here, and I can show you what that looks like. And we are reading straight into their system. So here's my purchase history on this invoice. So let's have a look at this invoice. Here's all the things. Oh, there's only one item on there. So I could either select all, or I would only select an individual item on that list, right? And then hit that, add to next button. It's going to add it to the cart. I don't want to go through that process and add it into a cart for them. But anyway, simple as that. So the idea in the B2B site is you want to give your customers lots of options as to how they can get that in there. So they have this method. They also have, let me get back to that initial screen. I also had my dealer favorites, and this is kind of like a wish list, except the difference between this, we call it a private catalog. Your customer could go on there and create their own list of frequently ordered items, so that they, rather than again navigating through that directory structure and the different categories and such and adding things one by one, they could just have this dealer favorites list. And then they just select the items that they want to do and order multiples at one time, kind of thing, right? So I want 8 of those, so add that to my, so we got a whole bunch of reorder stuff here. I guess this has been pre-populated probably from an earlier one. And if I just hit that update order, it's going to add it. That's probably what's happening here. It's just going to add it into my cart. So I can order multiples of any of these items on my frequently ordered items list. So that's another quick way for someone to get an order into the system. Let's go back and have a look at that same product we were looking at before and show you the difference. So here's the category view. If you recall, we didn't have any of this information down here on this, right? So I can order directly from this page if I want. I can see where I have availability. I can add it to my dealer favorites list. I can add it to the cart. So all of that is available to me right from this category list, or I can go straight down into the product list again. And now you can see I've got data in here. I can do the same thing from here. I can add it in. And incidentally, because I'm logged in here, we know who this person is. So we have context now. We know what price list they're on. We know what pricing has been granted to them. We know that they've got terms, all of that stuff. And we do support all of the price pricing levels, I guess, in Sage 300. So contract pricing, all the ABCDE discount price levels, sale pricing, all that is respected by the web store. Because we're reading that data live out of Sage, we know what this customer has access to, what they can buy, and at what price. So it's a very personalized experience in that sense, as well as when they do that customer portal look, it's showing them live access to their account details within Sage. And again, all that same information in here that was available as I was looking as a non-logged in person as well. So that's one side. That's a B2B side that shows you all kinds of cool and interesting features and functions. Let me show you one more. This is a B2C side, or focused web store. And you'll see the design is quite different. Now, back end, exactly the same product is driving all of this stuff in the same data center. Well, at least I think they're both in the same data center. They could be in different ones, but it doesn't really matter. It's exactly the same business logic is driving this site as was driving the other site. But you can see the design is completely different. So that sort of illustrates the point. It's going to be what you want it to be for your customers, the buying experience you want for them. So, clearly this is quite different. They got a scrolling image up here. I mean, these guys sell very expensive, cabinet hardware and towel bars and things like that. So they wanted a much more higher end look and feel, right? More polished. This is just things that they wanted to highlight on the front page. You can do all kinds of things like sign up for the newsletter, do a Facebook thing, all this stuff just basically built into the site at their request and design. And they participate very heavily, as would anybody that we built the site for, very heavily in the design. We have a design process that uses Adobe XD. It's very collaborative, and you would have access to all this information as we build this stuff out, so you can make it exactly the way you want. In navigating to the different products, they did it in a couple of different ways, either by the product family, which is really the design, or by the category. This is where this is going to be used in my house, right? So I could get to, let's do the Archimedes. That's one I typically would use, so I know what's behind it. So once I get into this level, here's everything in this family or design of products. And now we're deploying a filter on this side. So now I've got a subset of all my products in here, and I can further filter it down to, let's say, just towel bars and towel rings. And let's further filter that down. And now I've got a smaller list of items that I can look at. And when I click into the product information here, we're displaying another feature of the product, which we call grouping. So in this situation here, I have as an option, and this is controlled in this particular case through the item segmentation in inventory control. So you're probably aware that you can have, I think it's up to 10 item segments on any one item number. And by utilizing that, we can make use of them here as well. So here's one of the segments. So the first segment was probably the towel bar. Second segment was how long is it? Third segment is what's the finish? And as we go through those, we can validate when you're using the segmentation of the item number, we can then validate what the next items, what the next selections need to be. And so as we do that, you notice that the image changed to what that's going to look like. So on this one page, we are now showing what there's 3 there, and there's what we got here, 1, 2, 4, 9 or 8 or 9. So that's at least 24 or 36 different products being displayed on one page. So rather than having to have a separate page for every size and finish, I've got one page, unless we choose what all those attributes are for that particular product. And I can add it to my cart from here. And well, from that price, I don't have any of these in my house. This is where they add that additional information that Dataport lets them take care of. They've got the full product catalog, installation instructions. Here's all the specifications for the product and the care and maintenance for the product. Again, all of this stuff gets added to Dataport so that it provides a good buying experience or shopping experience for the customer as they're navigating through the site. So that's a bit of a different look and feel than the prior one, which is strictly aimed at, it's very, I guess, more utilitarian. This one is more polished, more aimed at an end consumer. So you can see there's quite a different approach to how these happen, and the Webtelligence platform can deal with either or both. We've got customers who have both B2C and B2B on their sites, and some who are strictly B2B. We have some folks who only use it for their internal sales staff. So it's really just an internal sales tool. It's not outward facing at all. So there's lots of different applications for how the platform can work for a particular customer. And there's other features and functions, like almost anything that you can imagine that you've seen on a web store, we can deploy with the Webtelligence platform. The only, call it limitation, if you want to call it that, is that we can't attempt to take an order on the web store that Sage is not prepared to accept as an order inside of Sage, right? So you can't come up with some weird, pricing or packaging that isn't set up in Sage. So we will respect all of the packaging that you've set up in Sage, all the different units of measure, all that stuff. But if you're trying to do something weird, we probably can't do that. Now, we do have a promotions component that allows us to deal with things that Sage doesn't deal with, kind of from a pricing perspective. So, maybe it's like if you buy 3 of these, you get 1 free, or you'll get free shipping, or we'll send you a free t-shirt or something like that, right? We can deal with those kind of things with our promotions module that Sage doesn't deal with effectively straight out of the box. So our promotions module will handle those kind of things. So, we can cover just about any scenario that you want. And we've got integrations into many other different components out there, like Avatax, for instance. If you're selling multi-state and you need to make sure that you're getting the right tax stuff done, they probably have Avalara already installed internally on their Sage 300 system. We can do the same on the web store and make sure that we get the appropriate tax calculations done for where that buyer is located. So those kind of things, right? So lots of different things like that we've integrated to in the past, chat features, lots of different stuff like that. So, just bring it to us and we'll figure out how to make it work. Or if you've got other things that you're integrating to, like, I don't know, MailChimp or something like that, for instance, we can deal with that as well. So that is the quick look at the web store, just to give you a sense of what's possible. We do have a couple of minutes left. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so maybe I can give you a quick look at the back end of the customer portal. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here. I just wanted to make sure we had time to cover everything on the web store side of things. And do feel free to type any questions into the Q&A if you have any. Back to the portal again, and this is the standalone portal once again. And I'm going to show you what the merchant gets to see when they log into their own portal. So first of all, we're going to see a bit of a dashboard. This is what's going on in my portal. Here's how many payments I took today, month to date, year to date, last year. So this gives you a sense about how active the portal is from a payment standpoint. Here's how many users are actually using my portal. So if you're calling in the beginning, I said you can have more than 1 user on any one AR customer account. So that's what this is showing. This shows how many AR customers are registered to be using the account. And here's how many have used it today, month to date, last year, or year to date, last year. All right, just going to get rid of that phone call. This bit down here is referring to any receipts that we process through the payment gateway, but we're not able to insert into Sage. Now, it should be 0, but there is a slim chance that when we sent the transaction off, got the post back, and attempted to append it into that AR receipt batch, that we lost connectivity. Very slim chance, but it's possible. So we had to accommodate for that. And that's what this is illustrating here, is that we couldn't insert 3 payments. If you just click that process button, we will attempt to insert them again and make that and complete that transaction. Running short on time here. Let's do this quick. This bit here is where you manage all of those users. If you want to create them all yourself, you'll do so through this screen. And there's 3 types, right? There's the user, which we looked at earlier, the merchant, which we're looking at now, and the salesperson, which is much like a user, except the first thing that we ask them for is which customer do you want to work with? And we'll look up by their customer number, by their name, by their phone number, by their email. We'll search by all those things. We can control which customers any particular salesperson or staff member can look at based upon the salesperson code that gets assigned to that customer in Sage. And I think that's in the AR where you have that two-digit salesperson code. So we can limit the customers that employee can look at based upon that code. So just so you're aware of that. And this is where you'll turn folks on and off here. So let's say we automatically authorize somebody through that process, but they got back to you and said, no, turn them off, you just come in here and turn them off. And you can search for these guys by username, by the customer, the salesperson login, date, status, all this kind of stuff. You can filter these. And if you recall the messages that got sent out, that one broadcast message, this is where that gets controlled. And this is where it displays for everybody as they log in. Another important bit here is all the receipts that have been made or have been attempted to have been made on the portal itself. So here's the one I did earlier today. Says it's done, and here's all the details with the auth codes and all that stuff. Here's the one I bailed out on earlier when I was doing the, I think it was still in the portal, I was doing this, where I didn't complete it. So I backed out of that. But it's going to tell me that here. All of that payments that have been made or attempted, this is typically me bailing out of transactions. All the transactions that have been made or attempted to have been made are here. You will always find them. And that flag there says it has been inserted into Sage. So this is successful. It's in an AR batch, probably completed at this point. And the portal settings, this is where you just set up all this good stuff. You can turn your portal on and off. There's a flag in AR that says allow on web. You can control which customers may or may not use the portal that way. The self-registration, here's all the questions we can ask to authorize that they are who they say they are and auto-approve there. The image file that shows up in that top left of the portal, and of course your address, welcome message, all that good stuff here. Very simple to change. And then I mentioned earlier too that you can control all the features and functions. So if you subscribe to everything but didn't want to show certain things, you just turn them off here and they just go away. They don't show up on the portal. Same holds true for the document types. If you don't want to show, I don't know, maybe you don't do unapplied cash and don't charge interest, they're not going to show up. Once you save that, they're not going to show up on that display for that customer. And you can tell us what domain name you want to use for your portal. The only other thing that I typically point out in here is the notifications. As you recall, I said you can be notified by email, by Slack, or by Teams. Very easy to set these things up. And you just tell us, what that email address. Setting up that webhook is dead simple. It's easily explained through our knowledge base and what you get informed by here, right? So a new user registered, we received a payment, an incomplete transaction. So somebody bailed out on the transaction, didn't complete it. So you get notified of all that. This is the technical contact. We have a component we call Connect that sits on the Sage 300 server, and it must be turned on because that's what governs the conversation. And if it gets turned off for some reason, then we can't connect. We're going to send a message to this person or to this team or to this Slack channel to say, we can't connect, please go and check. And it's generally just have to turn this on again, restart this service. And it's really simple to do. You just press a button and you're back in business again. And it can get turned off. Maybe you did an upgrade or, I don't know, something happened, power outage, and for some reason it didn't get turned back on. It's easy to correct that issue, but we will notify you if that happens because that's not within our control. And all the different notifications you get for orders, new users, order created, payment received, all those kind of things. And that is the back end of it. And sorry, I really rushed through that. I just wanted to make sure you got a good look at it. All of our contact information is here. Happy to field any specific questions that you have about either of these products, either the portal or Webtelligence, or perhaps how it might be used in the sales capacity for internal staff. Lots of resources out there on our website or on our YouTube channel. But generally speaking, if you have something very specific, just get in touch. We'll chat about it specifically and address any immediate concerns or any questions that you might have. And with that, I believe we are done. Thank you very much for your time, everyone, and have a great afternoon.